Good evening and welcome to the weekend prime time. We begin this hour with the high-stakes negotiations between the U.S. and Iranian officials in Switzerland today. Vice President J.D. Vance, along with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are on the ground meeting with Iranian officials, along with officials from Pakistan and Qatar, who are acting as mediators. And we're now getting a little bit of color of what went down behind closed doors. A source inside the room when the talks were taking place told MSNOW that the Iranians were, quote, frustrated by President Trump's recent comments. Trump told Fox News that he told the Iranians that they would not have a country if they closed the strait. Quote, you won't even make it back to your effing country. He also said, quote, we may take over the strait if we have to. I'll blow the expletive out of them. If they don't make a deal, we'll collect tolls. Earlier in the day, Trump also posted a Truth Social, quote, Iran must immediately stop their highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. If they don't, we'll hit Iran very hard again, just like we did last week, only harder. Because of these new threats, the first round of talks ended earlier than expected, but now a senior official from the Pakistan delegation confirms to MSNOW that the Iranians have, quote, come around and that talks are still continuing. Yeah, it's very hard to see how this ends up well on a number of fronts. Yeah. It's not that the things that Donald Trump and many of his allies want to happen are necessarily bad ideas. We do want to have Iran no longer funding proxies. We do want to have Iran not be a nuclear threat. But it's very hard to see how any part of their strategy to date has gotten us closer to those objectives.
Yeah, and I think the rhetoric that's coming out of Donald Trump, you know, that may work in American politics. That may work with the Republican Party, that he may want to kind of like pistol whip people into falling in line and getting them to fall behind him and whatever he says is going to happen. We see him use that language all throughout his political career over the last 10 years, that if he doesn't like something, he just threatens that person, he primaries that person, he uses kind of vulgar language against that person. That has not worked with the Iranians. And so the Iranian mindset going into these negotiations, and we've talked about this, is that they have leverage. They're not afraid to use that leverage. The chief Iranian negotiator, along with the foreign minister, the speaker of the parliament, responded to the president's tweet saying our armed forces are ready to respond across the region to anything that the United States does. And I think that Donald Trump approaches these negotiations thinking like, if I just sound like a tough guy on Truth Social, everyone's going to fall in line and do what I want. Well, you've already played your biggest card, which is that you've already gone to war. So the idea of deterrence has already been taken off the table. If the Iranians feel that they have just survived a war with Israel and America for the past 100 or so days and came out on the other side of it with more leverage, paralyzing the global economy, attacking Arab countries, responding to Israel directly, they feel that they can withstand whatever else the United States has. That doesn't mean that America doesn't have unlimited power that can go against Iran, but it knows that America has vulnerabilities and it is exploiting those vulnerabilities way more so than President Trump wants to let on. And I think that is what is emerging here today. It seems like Donald Trump is almost trying to torpedo these talks before they actually get to the substantive part, which makes me go back to the point that we talked about yesterday. Poor J.D. Vance. Like, J.D. Vance arrives there talking about the need for diplomacy. He actually had an incredibly powerful statement when he said, we are looking to transform fundamentally the relationship with Iran, which is an opening. It's the way you do conduct diplomacy, is giving a little bit of hope and optimism. And then the guy back here is like tweeting, we're going to bomb you back to, your country, or you won't even have a country to go back to.
Well, and let's remember that it has been 1 week since, I remember the show was about to start last week at around this time, and we ripped up everything because Donald Trump announces it's his birthday. He has a peace deal with Iran. And so it's taken only a week for him to get criticism and respond to it and to go back basically and torpedo the whole deal. And so why are we in a slightly better place, if any, today versus a week ago on Saturday? It seems like we're just repeating Groundhog Day over and over based on Donald Trump's whims and his desire to do the tough guy act that isn't working for him.
Yeah, the only thing I will say to that gives me a little bit of hope is that you actually have J.D. Vance and the Iranians in the same room with other parties. And on the surface of it, that may not seem like much, but the reality of it is to get Americans and Iranians being able to speak to each other directly, and we'll talk to Rick Stingle more about this in a minute, but having that kind of direct diplomacy is always better than going through a third and a fourth party. The Pakistanis are there, the Qataris are there.
But only if they're actually
good faith negotiations.
If they're empowered to speak on behalf of the president, and if the president doesn't know what he himself wants, how can anybody represent those wants?
You're absolutely right. But you're absolutely right. I was just saying, like, that was the only difference between last week and this week in terms of the sabotage. It's like now they're in the same room, but Donald Trump is still trying to torpedo the talk. So.
And this now political analyst Richard Stengel, he's also a former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. So, Rick, what do you make of these new developments and President Trump's threats to Iran just as the talks were getting underway today? Is he trying to derail negotiations?
At least I think there need to be special envoys of talks between the vice president and the president. They're obviously not communicating with each other. By the way, I agree with Eamon. I thought the vice president's statement that he made beforehand about remaking the Middle East, he finally talked about the Iranian people. I thought it was powerful and it was hopeful. And then Trump, in the most puerile, adolescent way, threatens the talks. And by the way, if there is one taboo in the history of diplomacy, going back to the Peloponnesian War, is you do not threaten envoys. I mean, no matter how opposed you are, and there he is threatening envoys. And by the way, to add to it, the number one plank in the Memorandum of Understanding says both parties must refrain from threats of force. He's already violated that a dozen times.
He's constitutionally unable to stick with that. I mean, this is all he has is, the use of force. But, I mean, Rick, do you see this actually being a good moment for J.D. Vance, where he looks like the sane actor on the international stage and is actually pursuing a policy end that the majority of Americans support?
Well, I don't very often feel bad for J.D. Vance, but I do today. Trump has put him out there. He had famously, according to all that New York Times reporting, he was the one member of the cabinet who objected to the invasion of Iran. In a way, maybe Trump is. Well, but maybe Trump is actually punishing him for that by putting him out there in this no-win situation. I do think he's trying to impose some kind of sanity on it. I do think, as I mentioned before, it's good that we're finally talking again about the Iranian people. But I also think it's kind of a no-win thing for him. I mean, if he's thinking about running for the presidency in a couple of years, this is going to be unpopular no matter what the outcome is. And insofar as he helped achieve an unpopular goal, that can't be helpful to him.
Rick, I want to get your thoughts on another member of this delegation that we are sending, which is the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has no official government role other than being related to the president, has a lot of interests, financial interests in the region. What influence do you think he may be having on these talks? And are you concerned about potential conflicts of interest that we have no insight into, given the fact that he's not a government official and doesn't have to make financial disclosures?
Yes, Catherine, I'm concerned. And you've written about this fact. I mean, it seems as though he chooses envoys. The more conflicts of interest they have, the more likely they are to be an envoy. I mean, Jared Kushner has so many conflicts. I mean, I don't know how he gets out of bed in the morning. And, the one thing that J.D. Vance said that was not true was that these are technical talks. You know what technical talks are? Technical talks were the JCPOA talks, where the Secretary of Energy, who was a nuclear physicist, was in those negotiations. They spent months negotiating about centrifuges and heavy water and 3.67% uranium enrichment. These are not technical talks. These are, what's sort of ironic is these were meant to be the sort of glad-handing, clap each other on the back talks rather than something that, explodes into disagreement.
Rick, let me play you a soundbite from somebody that you know well, Susan Rice. She was on ABC this week. Take a listen to her thoughts on these talks and the deal.
It ends a stupid war. You get bad outcomes or worse outcomes. This is a very bad outcome. I obviously think we shouldn't have been in this war in the first place because it was obvious for decades that the only way to resolve this problem is through diplomacy. And now we're back to diplomacy with a far weaker hand.
We are now back to diplomacy with a far weaker hand. Do you share that assessment with her that this, where we were on February 27th with the chance to talks and not having used our military force was a stronger hand than what we have now, having played 100 days of war with the Iranians?
I was also against the invasion. It does give us another type of leverage that we didn't have in the Obama administration, which is, we couldn't just threaten the use of force. We actually used force. But ironically, by canceling the Obama JCPOA, it put Iran, in a stronger position. Instead of enriching to this very small amount, 3.67%, which the JCPOA negotiated, they enriched to 60%. They have tons and tons of uranium at this very close to a nuclear level. So they are, in effect, closer to having a bomb now than they were at the time of our negotiation. So, and the other thing is, who would have ever predicted if you said to the Ayatollah and the Supreme Leader, the U.S. is going to bomb you for 30 days, but you're going to come out with getting the relaxation of sanctions, you're going to be able to ship your oil, and here's $300 billion to repair all the stuff that, that we did to you. It's bizarre that they are in as strong a position as they're in.
On the $300 billion pot of money that you mentioned, which is in the MOU, what is your understanding about who foots the bill for that?
Yeah, Catherine, I've read the same stories you guys have. I'm skeptical about it because when they announced it, they also mentioned that the Gulf states would contribute to that. I mean, the Gulf states are in a worse position with Iran than they were before the bombing. Iran has, in fact, attacked them. So the idea that the UAE or Qatar or Bahrain or Saudi Arabia is going to contribute to this $300 billion fund, I'll believe it when I see it. And without them, I don't know where the money's going to come from. I mean, the Europeans will probably give some token funds in order to placate Trump, but getting the $300 billion is going to be difficult.